On World News Tonight, Barrel Day. Hurricane Otus wreaks havoc in Mexico as the country suffers colossal damage. Steady ties. Blinken meets Wang in Washington ahead of possible Biden-Xi summit. Back on track. India resumes visa services to Canada, instilling hopes of easing bilateral relations. Spooky Cafe. Bangkok cafe waiters dress up as creepy witches and wizards to serve spooky treats for Halloween. A very good evening, and you are joining us on World News. We begin this Friday night in India, as the neighboring nation partially resumed visa services to Canada. Canada has also welcomed India's decision, saying the move was a good sign after an anxious time for many Canadians, amid a diplomatic row over the killing of a Sikh separatist leader. Let's take a look.
In a recent development, India has resumed visa services for Canadian citizens in specific categories, following a suspension that lasted nearly a month. This suspension occurred in response to Canada's allegations of Indian involvement in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Additionally, this decision came a week after 41 Canadian diplomats departed India, complying with New Delhi's demand. The Indian High Commission in Canada has officially announced the acceptance of visa applications for entry, business, medical, and conference purposes. It is noteworthy that while tourist visas and e-visas remain on hold, application from Canadians falling within these specified categories will also be accepted at Indian missions in other countries, a service that had been previously suspended. In response to a comprehensive assessment of the security situation, which also takes into consideration recent Canadian measures in this regard, the Indian High Commission in Ottawa issued a press release announcing the resumption of visa services for specific categories. The press release further stated that the mission would continue to address emergency situations and any further decisions would be made based on an ongoing evaluation of the situation. This indicates that a decision regarding the resumption of tourist visas and e-visas, which are the most common methods for visitors to apply, is still pending. The suspension of visa services has had a significant impact on numerous Canadians who were looking to travel to India. This includes individuals with family ties in India who were hoping to return for the festive season, as well as those with medical conditions requiring treatment in India. In the wake of the expulsion of its diplomats from the High Commission in Delhi, Canada has also temporarily halted in-person visa services at its consulates in other cities. It remains uncertain whether these services will be resumed following India's decision to reinstate visas.
China's ex-premier Lee Keqing died of a heart attack today, just 10 months after retiring from a decade in office during which his reformist star had dimmed. He was 68.
China's former premier Lee Keqing has died of a heart attack aged 68. Once viewed as a top Communist Party leadership contender, Lee was sidelined in recent years by President Xi Jinping, who tightened his grip on power and steered the world's second-largest economy in a more statist direction. The elite economist supported a more open market economy, advocating supply-side reforms in an approach dubbed Likeonomics that was never fully implemented. Ultimately, he had to bend to Xi's preference for more state control, and his former power base waned in influence as Xi installed his own acolytes to powerful positions. Chinese social media experienced an outpouring of grief and shock, with some government websites going black and white in an official sign of mourning. The Weibo microblogging platform turned its like button into a mourn icon in the shape of a chrysanthemum. Lee was premier and head of China's cabinet under Xi for a decade until stepping down from all political positions in March. Lee sparked debate on poverty and income inequality in 2020, saying 600 million people in China earned less than the equivalent of $140 per month. Some Chinese intellectuals and members of the liberal elite expressed shock and dismay on a semi-private WeChat channel at the passing of a beacon of China's liberal economic reform, with some saying it signaled the end of an era. A glowing 2014 state media profile of Lee, praising him as a calm and tough wall breaker, went viral shortly after his death was announced. It emphasized his hard work and tenacity in pushing for economic reforms. Lee's frequent visits to disaster sites and his easy camaraderie when speaking to ordinary people were also highlighted on Chinese state media. Retired Chinese leaders typically keep a low profile. Lee was seen last in public during an August private tour in northwest China. Social media videos showed him in good spirits, walking upstairs unaided and waving to excited crowds. Lee is survived by his wife Cheng Hong, a professor of English, and their daughter.
A hurricane of record intensity that smashed into the Mexican coast has left at least 27 people dead, one of the most powerful storms to ever hit the country. Hurricane Otus caused damage seen running into billions of dollars.
More than 24 people were killed when Hurricane Otus barreled into the Mexican beach resort of Acapulco, according to the government on Thursday. Otus struck Mexico the day before as a Category 5 storm after intensifying unexpectedly quickly off the Pacific coast. It flooded buildings, smashed windows and tore roofs and sidings of homes and hotels. It also cut communications and power, as well as road and air access across the city of nearly 900,000. Survivors of the storm were struck with disbelief at the trail of destruction left behind. I don't know how we're alive, this tourist says. At a news briefing, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said Otus was one of the most powerful storms to hit the country.
Fue muy desastroso.
What Acapulco suffered was really disastrous. People stayed in, they protected themselves, and that is why, luckily, we didn't have more deaths. The hurricane was very strong. What we are saying here has no precedent.
The government said several people were still missing and has declared a state of emergency in the region. Authorities said they were working to restore electricity and reactivate drinking water pumps, but many remain without basic services. At a gas station that wasn't offering any fuel, this man said people were becoming desperate. Some want to leave, others want to work. There is no gasoline. I hope people don't riot because it's getting serious now, he said. People were also seen looting stores and warehouses for supplies, wading in waist-deep floodwaters outside. Enki Research, which tracks storms and models the cost of their damage, said the impact of Otus was, quote, likely approaching $15 billion. Acapulco is the biggest city in the southern state of Guerrero, one of the poorest in Mexico. Its tourism-dependent economy is now in trouble, with many of the city's famous hotels badly damaged by the storm.
Main menace continues. Now over in the US, a manhunt is underway for the suspect in the mass shootings that killed 18 people and injured 13 in Lewiston, Maine. Authorities are attempting to locate 40-year-old Robert Card. According to the police, he should be considered armed and dangerous.
I had told my wife a couple of years ago, it's not if, my dear, it's when. And when happened last night.
Kent Spalding is a resident of Lisbon, Maine, one of the communities under a shelter-in-place warning, as police search for a U.S. Army reservist wanted for murder after 18 people were killed and 13 others were wounded in Lewiston Wednesday night. They are searching for this man, Robert R. Card, a sergeant at a nearby U.S. Army Reserve base, who enlisted in 2002 but had never been deployed in combat. Law enforcement officials said the 40-year-old suspect had been temporarily committed to a mental health facility over the summer. As the manhunt expanded, some schools were canceled, and residents in Lewiston and nearby communities were urged to stay indoors. Police found a white SUV they believe Card drove to the town of Lisbon, about 7 miles to the southeast of Lewiston. Spalding said it was a long night with little sleep.
Looking out my window with 50-plus police officers blocking off my street, standing in my yard to take care of this person who would do such an act in Lewiston, Maine last night.
The attacks began shortly before 7 p.m. at the Just-in-Time Recreation Bowling Alley. Police said 1 female and 6 males were shot dead there, without giving the victims' ages. Within about 10 minutes, they received reports of a shooting at a bar and restaurant about 3 miles away. 8 males were fatally shot dead there, police said. 3 victims who were taken to the hospital later died of their injuries. President Joe Biden said in a statement that he mourned, quote, yet another senseless and tragic mass shooting, and again urged Congress to pass a ban on high-capacity magazines and other gun regulations. Guns are lightly regulated in Maine, and the state does not require a permit to buy or carry a gun. It also does not have so-called red flag laws, which allow law enforcement to temporarily disarm people deemed to be dangerous.
Moving on to road to the White House now. Donald Trump's biggest supporters and fans packed into a gilded ballroom at Mar-a-Lago to send a message to Republicans that the primary is over. Hundreds of Donald Trump's biggest supporters and fans packed into a gilded ballroom at Mar-a-Lago to send a message to Republicans that the primary is over. It was estimated that around $6 million was brought in for Trump's 2024 efforts, according to figures announced at the event, an amount that would make the fundraiser one of the biggest single night holds of his 2024 campaign. In a speech that went over in half an hour, Trump touted his lead in the polls, taunted his opponents including Biden and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and talked about his record in the White House. The fundraiser comes days after 3 lawyers aligned with his efforts following the 2020 election pleaded guilty in Georgia. Over a dozen other people are charged with aiding the former president in what prosecutors have been described as an attempt to overturn the 2020 election. Trump also spent 2 days in court this week defending his company in a civil fraud trial in New York. Welcome back. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with China's top diplomat Wang in Washington. Blinken said that he looked forward to constructive conversations.
Top diplomats of the United States and China kicked off a long-anticipated discussion in Washington on Thursday. Speaking briefly before sitting down for talks, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken welcomed his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi.
I very much look forward to constructive conversations over the next 2 days.
Wang said Washington and Beijing have disagreements, but at the same time share important common interests and challenges that they need to resolve together. Comments that Blinken said he agreed with.
Not only should it be resumed, the dialogue should be in-depth and comprehensive so that with dialogue we can increase understanding, reduce misunderstanding and misjudgments.
Wang's 3-day visit follows a flurry of diplomatic engagements between the countries aimed at easing bilateral tensions. The current trip is primarily aimed at preparing a possible summit between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping in November on the sidelines of an Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Leaders meeting in San Francisco. And amid ongoing conflict, it's anticipated that the U.S. will use Wang's trip to urge China to play a constructive role in wars between Israel and Hamas, as well as Russia and Ukraine. The U.S. State Department previously hinted that North Korea issues would also be on the agenda of the meetings. China's top diplomat on Friday is set to meet with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and it's highly likely he'll speak with President Biden as well.
Moving on to the latest developments in Gaza. The Israeli military says Hamas used weapons made by North Korea and Iran during its October 7th attack.
The Israeli military says North Korean and Iranian weapons, which included mines, rocket-propelled grenades, and drones, were used by Hamas during its attack on Israel on October 7th. An Iranian mortar launcher and a North Korean-made grenade launcher were part of the haul of weapons recovered, with an official saying a total of 20% of all weapons used by Hamas during the attacks were from North Korea and Iran. Iran's foreign minister told the United Nations on Thursday that Tehran is ready to play a role in mediating talks to release Israeli hostages from Hamas, along with Qatar and Turkey. However, he said in order for such negotiations to take place, Israel must be prepared to release 6,000 Palestinians held in its prisons. Meanwhile, according to Russian media outlet TASS, a delegation from Hamas visited Moscow on Thursday for talks on the release of hostages, including Russian citizens that the militant group is currently holding in Gaza. The Kremlin said Iran's deputy foreign minister is in Moscow to hold talks with Russian officials to discuss the ongoing conflict and find ways to stabilize the situation. Israel slammed the visit by the Hamas delegation, saying that Russia should expel them from their country, while criticizing Russia for inviting them.
Now over in South Australia, public school teachers are set to strike during a crucial exam period.
They're scenes we saw just last month. Now threats it could happen again in the middle of SACE exams.
I don't think we can underscore enough the level of anger that's being felt out in the education community.
After 11 months of negotiations, the Education Union fed up, giving the government a deadline of November 6 to present a third pay offer. Or teachers could strike on Thursday, November 9, the same day Year 12s do their physics and accounting exams.
This doesn't advance things to the union. It wasn't needed. It came as a real surprise to the government. Yeah, I was pretty shocked to see this.
The government's offered public teachers a 3% pay rise annually over the next 3 years. The union says that's not enough, but insists if strike action proceeds, exams will not be impacted.
What I'm saying over and over again to you is that there will be support for Year 12 students. We'll make sure that's the case. We'll be having a look at that situation and having a look at who needs to be on deck to ensure that Year 12s are supported. And I think it's as simple as that.
The opposition's not convinced and says any disruption could give private school students an unfair advantage over those in the public system.
I'd encourage them not to strike at all, but if they're going to, at least wait the 8 days until the exams are over.
I'm still confident, despite this, that we are going to be able to deliver a final agreement soon that will get teachers a pay rise and it will get teachers a workload reduction as well.
Nigeria's Supreme Court upheld President Bola Tinubu's election win, bringing an end to a legal challenge brought by his two main rivals.
Nigeria's Supreme Court upheld President Bola Tinubu's election win, dismissing claims from two opposition leaders who argued that his victory was marred by irregularities. These are leaders of Tinubu's APC party listening in as the judgment was delivered.
Affirming the election of the second respondent as the duly elected President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is hereby affirmed.
The ruling gives Tinubu a clear mandate to govern Africa's most populous nation, which is grappling with double-digit inflation, foreign currency shortages, and widespread insecurity. The biggest opposition, the People's Democratic Party, said it was alarmed and disappointed by the ruling, saying the judgment has, quote, shaken the confidence of Nigerians in the judiciary. Tinubu welcomed the decision, saying in a statement that it was a moment to come together. Here's Tinubu's chief of staff.
The judgment was sound. We invite all political parties to join hands with Mr. President so we can move this country forward together.
Atiku Abubakar of the PDP came second and Peter Obi of the Labour Party came third in the February vote. The Supreme Court's judgment is final and follows a pattern seen in previous presidential elections that have been challenged. None of the attempts to overturn results through the courts has been successful.
Welcome back. Japan is set to begin its third round of radioactive wastewater release next month. For more on that story and more, let's take you around the world in a minute. Officials reported 5 people were shot dead at a home in North Carolina, United States, and officers were called to a home near Clinton yesterday after reports of a homicide. The Tokyo Electric Power Company said yesterday that it will begin its third round of radioactive wastewater release from its devastated Fukushima nuclear power plant on November 2nd. Construction workers and union members have marched through Sydney, Australia, calling for the ban of engineered stone. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced yesterday the creation of a 39-member advisory body to address issues in international governance of the artificial intelligence. Over 500 marine mammals died of bird flu in October in Brazil. The outbreak was spotted at the beginning of October in the southern Praia do Cassino in the city of Rio Grande. That is all we have for you on World News Tonight. If you missed any of our programs, you can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/othertharenenglish. We're leaving you tonight in a new cafe in Bangkok, Thailand, as waiters greet customers with a witchy sinister laugh welcoming them for a spookily delicious Halloween. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.